Yellow flowers. Dow stared at the floor and suppressed a sigh. All around him, other students studied, reading the scriptures or meditating, clearing their minds for the coming challenge. He alone, it seemed, was bored. He strolled to the small stone window that looked down from the temple to the valley below. He had lived down there once. It felt like another lifetime now. As a boy, he had looked up at the high, mysterious walls of the temple with awe. Ever since the day he had seen the monks performing martial arts at the village celebrations, he had known he had wanted to be one of them. He had longed to leap and twirl and kick like them. He had marvelled at their power and skill. For years, he had dreamt of being accepted as a disciple, and on the day when his dream had come true, he could remember his excitement and how proud his family had been. How different the reality from the fantasy. For 5 years he had trained here. At first it had seemed wondrous, but now it was a prison. The martial arts were fine. He enjoyed the exercise, and sometimes the boys would meet after dark to spar and fight and discover whose techniques were the best. Sadly, however, he had learned that most of the monks' training involved sitting still for hours on end, staring at a wall. Supposedly, this was try to clear the mind of thoughts in order to reach some sacred state. Dow wasn't entirely sure that he wanted to rid his mind of thoughts. He liked thinking. The meditation was useless anyway. His thoughts came whether he tried to stop them or not, which was a relief, frankly. After all, if he couldn't think, what was he going to do to pass the time in this dreadful place? Once he had asked his master if instead of meditation he might be allowed to practice his spear form again. He had enjoyed 10 lashes across his back with a birch cane for that suggestion. Now when meditation time came, he sat facing the wall and daydreamed about his favourite subject, women. There were, of course, now feelings inside him that had not been present in the boy who had been initiated into the temple. Some of the older monks said that a man could not truly desire what he had never had, but Dow knew that was nonsense. He had never lain with a woman, and he desired to more than anything. Again his mind drifted to her, the nameless girl he had seen on a trip with Master Huen. They had been journeying south to the capital on a pilgrimage when Dow and Huen had crossed paths with the girl. She had been attempting to ford a fast-flowing river. The rains had been heavier than usual that season, and the river, usually tame and docile, had swelled with a fast, dangerous current. Contact with women was not permitted for the monks of the temple. Even speaking to a woman could be grounds for expulsion. On seeing her, Dow had felt his face flush at her beauty and had to fight not to stare. Master Huen had shocked him by greeting the woman and making easy conversation. After allaying her fears, Huen had carried the woman on his back across the river while Dow had wrestled with her luggage. On the other side, the woman departed. Dow had turned to his master, a hint of jealous anger in his voice. "We are not permitted to talk to women, let alone carry them on our backs." Master Huen's eyes had sparkled as he looked at the younger man. "I merely carried her across the river. You are still carrying her, I think." Dow wondered what that woman was doing now. Perhaps she was even down in the valley somewhere, tending crops or livestock. It did not matter. Even if she were just on the other side of the temple walls, she might as well be upon the moon for all the good it would do to him. Dow turned from the window and looked about the room at the other students. Today one of the Grand Masters was attending the temple to test the class. Every year he would come, and if a student passed his ridiculous tests, then they would leave with the Grand Master to become his permanent disciple. Everyone was tense and worried, especially the masters. Dow could see it in how they walked and how they talked. The change in them flowed into the very stones of the temple. The students too felt it and pushed themselves to attain some new level of understanding on the cusp of the challenge, each of them hoping to be chosen. Why any of them cared so much was lost on Dow. It was said it had been some years since the Grand Master had chosen anyone. Dow was not holding his breath. He had no idea what form the challenge would take or how they would be tested this year. Usually it was some stupid riddle or other. Absently, he hoped that, just maybe, it would be a martial challenge this year. That would be some fun at least, and he would stand half a chance of winning. He trained harder than many of the others in that respect. It was all that kept him sane. Few of the other students could stand a single round with him, apart from Kin, who Dow had to begrudgingly admit was a decent fighter. None could really challenge him. Even Kin, for all his skill, could not best Dow, but had once lasted 3 5-minute rounds with him and bloodied his nose, an impressive feat since Kin was considerably the smaller and lighter of the two youths. Dow glanced to where Kin sat, one of the masters whispering some advice in his ear. Kin was the golden boy of the monastery, and all the students knew that if anyone would be selected by the Grand Master, then it would be him. Dow could not, or would not, see it himself. He found Kin insular and pompous, always reading, always studying. He was far too serious for Dow's liking. Once a group of merchants had visited the temple for the night, their wives and daughters in tow. Dow had found a way up onto the roof of the bathhouse some minutes after the women had entered to bathe, and carefully moving a slat of wood, had created for himself the most wonderful viewpoint. When one of the masters had seized his foot and dragged him roughly from the roof, Dow had screamed. He had hit the floor hard, rage flaring, and had leapt up ready to strike. Kin had stepped forward into his path, blocking his punch and slapping Dow across the face. Dow had spent a month on basic rations. With a sigh, he sat down against the cool stone of the wall and closed his eyes, pretending he was deep in meditation. If he was lucky, he might catch a few winks of sleep before the Grand Master arrived. It was late in the afternoon, with a lazy sun streaming through the low windows, when the students were assembled for the testing. It was obvious from the start that this would not involve any martial arts. Dow shrugged. The Grand Master would come and go, and life would go on. Dow reasoned that if he was especially lucky, then maybe Kin would be chosen to leave too. That would be pleasant. The Grand Master was older and more wizened than ever this year. In fact, if someone had asked Dow to describe in great detail what a Grand Master should look like, he could well have described the hobbled old men who entered the hall. Small of stature and long of beard, the Master moved silently between the rows of students, a willow cane resting over the sleeve of his robe. The feeling in the room grew tense, but hidden in one of the rows, one of over 100 purple-clad, shaven-headed youths, Dow felt very detached and completely untouched by the tension. He needed only sit here and wait. The Grand Master waddled around the hall for what seemed like an eternity, and Dow found himself stifling several yawns in the time it took anything to happen. At last the Grand Master stopped, standing directly before Kin. Well, this is a fix, if ever there was one, thought Dow. In which hand do you hold the secrets of the sutras? Asked the Grand Master. His voice was as thin as rice paper. Kin thought for a moment and was about to reply when the aged Master struck him over the head with his willow branch. Quats! The Grand Master bellowed. Dow fought hard to suppress a snigger, biting his lip for good measure. It couldn't have happened to a more deserving fellow. In which hand do you hold the secrets of the sutras? The Grand Master repeated. This time Kin hurriedly offered his right hand. Quats! Screamed the Grand Master, again swiping his cane down, this time over Kin's knuckles. Kin, with a cry of indignation, retracted his hand sharply. Dow bit the insides of his mouth and felt his face flushing red with the desire to burst out laughing. Suddenly everything was charged with an insane humour born of the ridiculous. The seriousness of the setting seemed suddenly bizarre. All these young men sitting in neat lines, chasing these nonsensical teachings, like they were the be-all and end-all. He knew with all his heart that he should not laugh, but everyone else's deadly seriousness just added to the mirth. He felt it building inside him. He replayed in his mind the divine sound of cane slapping off Kin's bald head. The Master shouting, Quats! Was that even a word? In which hand do you hold the secrets of the sutras? The Grand Master asked for a third time. Not one to give up, is he? Dow thought. Honoured sir, the sutra is not held in the hand but... Kim began. Dow's shoulders were already rising and falling dangerously fast, knowing with certainty what was coming. "Quats!" The crack, as the cane bounced off Kim's head, was so loud that this time even Dow winced. In the silence that followed, Dow found himself digging his nails into his thighs and screwing his face. But it was as if the laugh that had built up could not now be stopped. He felt it coming and tried to quash it. He knew that the consequences would be severe punishment, but something had to emerge. A noise came from him, part gurgle, part gasp, almost like a suppressed sneeze. But in the quiet of the room, it sounded deafening. The Grand Master's head snapped up like a hawk, zeroing in on a rabbit. Dow, having released a little bit of his mirth, returned to biting his lip. His face, he knew, was bright red, and he caught the fierce eyes of his own master and knew he would be whipped red later. The Grand Master moved away from Kin and began to weave between the rows once more. Dow felt a cool feeling settle on him as the old man approached, and something deep in Dow knew the Master was going to stop before him. Dow was ready and looked up into the Grand Master's kindly old face as he stopped. There was a twinkle in the ancient eyes that caused Dow to smile, a shared joke between the two of them. "In which hand do you hold the secrets of the sutras?" the Grand Master asked. "I've no idea," said Dow honestly. In his head he added silently, "Don't much care either." The old man's eyes hardened and the stick came down hard. "Quats!" Dow rubbed his crown. The pain was sharp and cut through his good mood. "In which hand do you hold the secrets of the sutras?" the Grand Master asked again. "That hurt," said Dow, glaring up at the old man. He heard sighs of shock fill the room and was aware of the other masters climbing to their feet in astonishment. His whipping would likely now be more akin to a beating. The old man stared at Dow for a moment. "Quats!" he shouted suddenly, whipping the cane across Dow's face to leave an angry red welt on Dow's cheek. "In which hand do you hold the secrets of the sutras?" the Grand Master asked, prodding Dow with his stick. Dow did not know what to say, his body now trembling with anger, so he kept silent. The Grand Master raised his cane high, ready to strike, and all of Dow's frustration surfaced. Surging to his feet, Dow grabbed the stick and wrestled it with ease from the old man's hand, then struck the Master over the head with it. "Quats!" Dow screamed into the old man's face. A stunned silence filled the hall. Dow was aware of his peers. All of their faces wore expressions of horror. Dow's master was striding up the side of the hall, his face like thunder. Dow's eyes fell on Kin. Kin smiled at him and nodded, almost in approval. Puzzled, Dow turned back to the Grand Master, whose face blossomed into a broad smile, and he embraced Dow warmly. "Good, good," he proclaimed as he stepped back. "I will take this one."